Hello, it's me again, Ray, with yet another podcast episode. Now, what's this one all about? I decided this week to talk about weekends back in the 50s and 1960s. Now, you might think weekends, well, what about weekends? They were very different. Let's start with adults. So what did the adults do come Saturday? Well, Mother, as usual, Mother had to get up, make the beds, make the breakfast, clear up the breakfast things, wash up, blah, blah, blah. That's all she ever did. Saturdays were for repairing and tinkering with cars as far as the males were concerned. That's families that had cars. Bear in mind, in the 50s, cars were quite expensive and they were quite high maintenance as well. So cars were on the agenda for Saturdays. Plugs, points, that's spark plugs, you take them out, you clean them or replace them. The points in the distributor, clean those or replace them. And not every Saturday replace them, of course, but clean the plugs and points, tinker about, clean the air filter or replace it. All sorts of jobs on cars. Clean the car, clean up the inside, give them a wash. You go over the engine. Now, of course, not everyone was able to do this. Out of the people that had cars, and there weren't that many in the 50s, not everyone could afford to take them to be serviced regularly at the garage. Because, as I say, they were high maintenance. So if you could do it yourself, that was great. If not, there was very often a neighbour that used to make a few shillings on the side, tinkering about with other people's cars. My father-in-law did that for many years, so he told me. So Saturday was spent tinkering about with the family car, if you have one, of course. Mother would be preparing a picnic, possibly, to go out into the countryside or down to the beach. In those days, there was a picnic hamper. Do you know what a picnic hamper is? It was like a wicker basket, usually a wicker basket, and a couple of leather straps on the front. You open that up, and inside there are, clipped into the lid, there are plates, plastic knives and forks. When I say plastic, probably Bakelite back in the 50s. Bakelite was a big thing then. Just about everything was made out of Bakelite. Hair dryers, knives and forks, cups, as I say, all the picnic stuff. A lot of Bakelite being used. So Mother would be preparing the picnic for the family to go off to the beach or the countryside, making the sandwiches, packing all the food, the flask, thermos flask, big thermos flask, full of tea, drinks for the kids, bottles of Tizer and lemonade, a bit like the famous 5 lashings of lemonade, off for the picnic in the summer. Now, not everyone had Saturday and Sunday off. A lot of people obviously had to work. All the shops were open Saturdays, as they are now. A lot of places were open Saturdays. So not every father of the family had the Saturday off. His only day off was Sunday. A 6-day week was quite common for most people. That was it, just your one day. There was Wednesday half closing at the shops. So if someone happened to work in a shop, they might get a half day on Wednesday. But even then, staff in shops had to go in on Wednesday afternoon to do stock taking and clearing up and organising and various other jobs in the shop. So Saturday wasn't a day off for everyone. But if you were lucky to have the day off, then you, as I say, you tinker with the car and then get into a spot of gardening. I think picnics, actually thinking back, a lot of picnics happened on the Sunday. So after tinkering with the car, if there was no picnic going on, there's the garden. Now don't forget, a lot of people in those days grew their own vegetables and fruit, soft fruit, all sorts of things were grown in the garden because most people didn't have a great deal of money. So gardening, especially the vegetable plot or the vegetable patch, which was usually down at the end of the garden, that was a major importance. That was a major job on a Saturday for those that didn't have to work, of course. I remember in our garden we had gooseberry bushes, we had peas, black currants, red currants, raspberries. I remember eating the raspberries, sitting amongst the rows of little bushes, eating raspberries and all sorts down there, shelling peas and having to hide the pods in case anyone saw them. You can't leave a pile of pods there, that's the evidence. So yeah, good fun. Everyone did a lot of gardening. And as far as vegetables were concerned, just about everything, even potatoes that took up a lot of land, carrots, beetroot, all this sort of thing, onions, the whole lot. If you had a big enough garden, the whole lot, you'd grow yourself. because you really could save a lot of money. Saturdays were busy days. Also, there was window cleaning. Okay, there were window cleaners, but again, not everyone could afford a window cleaner. If you start buying all your fruit and vegetables, paying the window cleaner, paying someone to do your car, it really did add up, and people just couldn't afford it. People were paying rent, or for those that had a mortgage, which was in those days a lot more than rent, that's about all they could afford, just to pay the mortgage and scrape together enough food to survive on. I remember seeing a lot of people that lived fairly near to the sea, like a couple of miles away. If they didn't have a car, they'd walk down to the beach. You'd see whole families, 4 or 6 people, 6 members of the family, all walking towards the beach, carrying picnics, bucket, spade, ball. They'd just walk down there in the summer. And it was a good day out. The beach was always packed in the summer, lots of people everywhere, kids running around. It was a really good day out. And of course, it didn't cost a great deal. As far as the picnic was concerned, a few sandwiches, as I say, flask of tea and some drinks, and that was it, job done. That was your lunch. And a lot of families spent the whole afternoon into early evening down the beach. So yes, it was a good day. Saturdays were busy days, cleaning windows, repairing cars, gardening, mowing the lawn, all this sort of thing, jobs around the house. The older children, I don't know whether there was an age limit, a minimum age, but they would often go to Saturday morning pictures. Now, I went a few times. It wasn't my thing. I didn't particularly like it, but it was good fun. I remember the film would break. Invariably, it would break, and all the kids would shout out, oh, shouting and banging feet and things, and the usherettes, the ladies going around with ice cream, trying to quieten everyone down. Be quiet, be quiet. The projectionist will fix the film, he'll mend it, just wait a minute, be patient. So Saturday morning pictures was quite good. There wasn't a great deal to do in the town. I remember kids roaming around the town. It wasn't my sort of thing, as I say. The beach wasn't my thing either. The countryside was what I enjoyed. I didn't like sitting in the pictures surrounded by a load of people. I didn't like being in the town surrounded by a load of people, and I didn't like the beach surrounded by a load of people. My thing was the countryside, and that's what I liked about a picnic on a Sunday. Now, Sundays were very different to what they are today. Sundays were a day of rest. All the shops were closed. Nothing was open here. You couldn't buy a pint of milk. Well, you couldn't buy milk anyway. You had your milkman deliver that. You couldn't buy a packet of cigarettes or anything. Everywhere was closed. It was Sunday, day of rest. End of. That was it. Unlike today, where everywhere is open. But a picnic on a Sunday was fantastic. If the weather was nice, Mum would make the picnic up, all the sarnies and the rest of it, and we'd get into the car. That's, if you had a car. And drive out to the countryside. Now that was fantastic. Drive out to the woods or find a field somewhere. A lot of people did that. And even those that didn't have cars, if they were lucky enough to live somewhere near some countryside, some open fields or a bit of woodland, they'd take their stuff, they'd walk off with their picnic into the woods. It was lovely. And of course, that's where kids learned about stuff, learned about wildlife, the birds, the animals, the plants, the wildflowers. It was great fun. And you could spend an entire Sunday in the woods or in a field somewhere, just running about and generally having fun. Very different to what it is these days. As I said, these days a lot of people go shopping, they go down to the town, they have coffee out, they go out for lunch. There was none of that. You didn't go out for lunch. The majority of people couldn't afford that. No doubt some people went out for lunch. I mean, pubs were open. I don't know whether they did food. Did they do food in the 50s? I don't think pubs did food in the 50s. In the 60s, early 70s, food started coming in, didn't it? Of course, for the male drinkers, pubs were open from 12 noon till 2 o'clock on a Sunday. So they go down the boozer and and have a few pints with their mates and the regulars, and then come back and have Sunday lunch at about 2:30. So then go to sleep, no doubt. And in the 60s, a lot of people had televisions, doze off in front of the TV. Kids would go into their garden or go to their bedrooms, play around with toys or whatever. There wasn't a great deal on TV for kids then. I do remember in the 60s, on a Sunday evening, there was Sunday night at the London Palladium with, was it Bruce Forsyth and whoever else? I can't remember the names now. That was a major feature of Sunday evening. On the radio, was it 7 o'clock? Sing Something Simple with I believe, the Adams singers. Sing something simple. I can't remember the words just as well. You don't want to hear me sing. And that for me was a bad sign. That meant that it was Sunday evening when I heard that on the radio, and it always seemed, every Sunday, it seemed to be on the radio. I don't know whether there was perhaps nothing on the TV at that time. Perhaps it was 6 o'clock in the evening. I can't remember. But that just said to me, that's it. The weekend is over. Tomorrow is Monday and school. And I hated school. Did I hate school? I won't go into that now. I'll save my hatred for school for another episode. In fact, I believe I've mentioned it before. Probably once or twice, a couple of dozen times, probably on every episode. So that was it. Sunday evening, I really hated it. What I would do is go into my room. I had an old valve radio, you know, the old wireless that you used to have. Had one by my bed. And it had shortwave on it as well as long and medium wave. And I had an aerial lashed up around the room. And I used to tune around the shortwave band, listening to foreign stations, trying to take my mind off Monday morning. There was something else dreadful about Sunday evenings. Sunday was bath night. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that you only had a bath on a Sunday, that no one had showers or anything. Sunday was bath night. And again, that made me realise that it's school tomorrow. Hated the whole thing. School uniform, you know, Mum had washed all that and ironed it. That was all folded up neatly on the end of your bed. Oh dear, school. So that was it. Into bed. After a bath, you've had your dinner. You've had Sunday afternoon tea. That was quite nice. Sunday afternoon tea. Was it high tea or whatever it was called? Because you had dinner at lunchtime, 2 o'clock, whenever, and then you'd have tea. And that was cake, jam sandwiches, a pot of tea, of course, with the tea cosy on, a little jug of milk, all wheeled in on a trolley, which was rather nice. And some cake, always homemade cake, of course. You didn't go out and buy cakes. People made them at home. Mothers were at home all the time, unlike today. So Sunday afternoon tea was nice. Then, as I say, sing something simple, then bath, and then bed. But tuning around on shortwave to see what foreign stations I could hear. So weekends back then, yeah, very, very different. A lot of jobs to do around the house, a lot of outings for families. Not every family went out on picnics, of course. They just stayed in the garden. I remember as kids, we'd often stay in the garden on a Sunday rather than go out anywhere. We had a tent in the garden. I think kids in those days, they did more activities in the gardens, like a tent, and they played ball. They had various things. I would do up my bike because I had to cycle to school. You know, I'd do any repairs to my bike that I had to. Go and nick tools from Dad's sheds, you know, and then leave them out in the garden somewhere so they go rusty in the rain, then get told off. Yes, Sundays were quite busy. Well, the whole weekends were quite busy, packed with jobs and outings and picnics. Next to no television. Very, very few. Well, there was nothing on the television. I think we had elderly people next door to us. They didn't sit in the garden. They had a chap that came round to do their garden. I mean, they were in their 80s, so they couldn't stand the sunshine. I don't know what they did all day. I probably listened to the wireless, did a bit of knitting. Everyone did knitting. All the grannies would sit there knitting. I don't know what they were knitting. Scarves, hats and gloves, I suppose. Older kids, sort of 14, 15, 16, they would go fishing down the beach or fishing at a local river or lake if you had one. I used to like fishing. I didn't like catching fish though, so what I did, I'd sit there with nothing on the hook, just watching the float in the water, just sort of bobbing around. I just didn't like catching the fish. They were scaly and horrible and I couldn't get the hook out. Other kids played football. That wasn't my thing, but other kids played football up the local park. So much going on outside activities. Everyone was outside. Of course, winter, totally different thing. If there's snow, you're out there building a snowman or chucking snowballs at each other or at passing cars, if there were any. Hardly any cars passed in the 50s. You were lucky to see a car go down your road in the 50s. Unlike today, can't move for parked cars everywhere. Traffic jams, goodness me. But in the winter, it was mainly staying indoors by the coal fire, playing games, board games, Monopoly that everyone hated. I don't know why they played it, but they did. Snap, card games, various things. Listening to the radio, the wireless as it was called. What was that on lunch times on a Sunday? the Billy Cotton Band Show, the Clitheroe Kid, Itmar, all these things were on the radio, and they were good. Actually, I've often thought it's a shame that all this stuff isn't still on the radio, in a new format, of course. We don't want the old stuff repeated again and again. But there's nothing on the radio now, is there? I have a listen around a lot because I repair radios for a living. That's what I do. And I've always got a radio on in the workshop. There's just nothing anymore. There used to be all these plays. What was it? Armchair Theatre. I think that was on the TV, wasn't it? There were half-hour plays on the radio, all sorts of things. Sherlock Holmes, Hancock's Half Hour. Do you remember that? That was on TV, but that started on the radio. There we are, reminiscing, thinking back. Good fun, happy days, very different days. Imagine that. No mobile phones, no computers, no iPads. Good grief, what did we do? Thanks for listening, as always. I shall see you next Sunday. Well, I won't see you, you'll hear me next Sunday. So have a good week and take care. Bye-bye for now.